For the Alabama-Auburn game, this was a huge game. Little kind of personal note on this game. Unfortunately, I actually did miss part of this game, or a good bit of this game, unfortunately, because me and my fiance were flying back from her parents' house, and we had scheduled the flight in advance and had scheduled it to be a night day because we scheduled it before the game time was officially announced. And this game, as they mentioned on the broadcast, I know a couple of times, had been a non-night game since 2007, and now it's a night game in Tiger Stadium, in Auburn, Jordan-Hare. There's not a whole lot I can do about it, and so we were flying back for part of this. I did catch the beginning of this game, and then we were able to listen to Chris Stewart and watch the entire second half, but, for the first half, I did miss parts of this. I was able to do a full rewatch of this game, so I do know what all happened, but that's part of the reason why this is a little delayed in coming out, but I did still wanna talk about it because I think that there's some things that Alabama, definitely can take away positives from this game, as well as some things that they're gonna have to clean up going into the Georgia game. Additionally, if you have not seen, the Film Guide Network, Brooks Austin did a really good job breaking down Alabama's film from this game. I think there's a lot of things that he pointed out that were really, really important. He also made note that some of the things that you need to realize is when Bryce Young was against Auburn, he got sacked 7 times and then went up against a Georgia defense with 5 first rounders and didn't get sacked a single time. There are certain things that happen in Auburn Stadium that just happen to Alabama that don't happen any other time of the year, whether it's facing Georgia or somebody else, right? It's that rivalry game is the reason why they say throughout the record book. So something just worth noting, this game should not be the best barometer for what the team is as a whole, and we should know that going into this one. But just something worth mentioning. First things first, if we kind of look at the general, some of the big takeaways. First things first, I think that Ty Simpson made some of the biggest plays in the game and also missed some pretty big plays. I think that there are obviously like the deep ball that he missed to Jeremy Bernard. Obviously could have come back to hurt you. There were some other plays that it just looked like he clearly was out of sync throwing the football. Obviously, with how efficient Ty was throwing the football for large stretches of this season, that obviously was not great to see. The good part about that is that your running attack was the best running attack that you've had, this season. You got Jam Miller, ran the best he's has all season. You could argue 15 carries for 83 yards. The only downside to that is Jam Miller does go out with, a an ankle injury, at worst, a pretty really bad, potentially dislocation, potentially even a broken ankle. You're not going to have him for the SEC championship game, so you're going to be relying on the likes of Daniel Hill and AK Deer and some of those guys because from what we've heard, you also have the broken jaw in the backfield with Kevin Riley. So your backfield is, down to at minimum Daniel Hill, maybe your backup, but obviously, Kevin Riley got a lot of the early season snaps there as well, but at minimum, you're down to like your second and fourth options, if not your third and fourth options in the backfield with Kevin Riley's injury. So you're down to AK Deer, Daniel Hill, Robert Young. Those are the guys who you're really looking at, or sorry, Richard Young, who you're really looking at to step up for this next game against Georgia. So that is something worth noting. I will say the benefit to that is you got some really good runs out of your actual running backs in this game. And then you also had some solid run. I think Ty Simpson did really good job getting out in open space, running the football. I'm not sure how often you're going to want him to run because it did feel like Auburn put some decent shots on him and he was banged up at times in this game. And I think that he was struggling because of that. Additionally, you already have some other injuries with like Josh Cuevas. You're not sure if he's going to be back and available for this game. You did have some issues to your center, Parker Brailsford. He's pretty much on one leg. His foot is I believe it's his right foot is definitely having some issues. It's fully taped up. You saw Gino Vandermark come in at times in this game. And, again, as Film Guy talked about, as Brooks talked about, it seemed like obviously having 2 feet under Gino was better than 1 foot under Parker. Parker's a great center, but he's on one tire and there's not a whole lot he can do about that. And it does obviously hurt you in your running game because part of your running game and the success of your running game is running behind Caden Proctor, and part of the rest of your success of your running game is having the pulling center of Parker Brailsford, but him going and attacking on the pull. And when he's has the inability to attack on the pull due to the injured ankle, injured foot, That obviously is a major problem. So that is one thing you kind of Alabama definitely has some injuries all up and down the players currently. Like I said, the major ones you're looking at Cuevas, Brailsford, and at this point, Jam Miller. Those are kind of your three biggest injuries that you're currently dealing with. I guess additionally Kevin Riley, but those are kind of some of your biggest injuries that you're currently dealing with. I'm sure there are other things kind of throughout, but the big thing that means is you got to have some other guys step up. Whether that be Caleb Edwards is going to have to step up, a Marshall Pritchett, you're gonna need somebody, Jay Lindsey, you're gonna need somebody from a tight end perspective that's gonna step up, especially if Josh Cuevas is unable to go. I know that all of them, were thrown into duty in that Auburn game, and they had some good plays, they had some bad plays, but at the end of the day, they're gonna have to continually step up if they're gonna go up against that Georgia front, because I think that Georgia learned a lot against Alabama in the first game when Alabama was able to be so dominant on third down. The reason why Alabama wins that Georgia game, the first game, is because of how dominant they were on third down. Obviously, this Auburn game was not the case. Alabama was not dominant on third down. The reason they win this Auburn game is similar to why Alabama lost to Oklahoma, right? Auburn outgained Alabama. Auburn, had the yards advantage, had the advantage obviously being at home. And the reason why Alabama wins this game is Auburn coughed up the football twice. And honestly, probably should have coughed it up more than that. Auburn had 4 fumbles in this game. Alabama only was able to recover one of them, and that was the one that ended up sealing the game for all intents and purposes. Additionally, Alabama does get one interception off of the carom that Bray Hubbard ends up picking off. There were some other picks that Alabama definitely could have had in this game, but Alabama only is able to recover again the one interception, the one fumble. So you end up getting 2 turnovers, but again, it could have been worse than that. Again, Ty Simpson potentially could have thrown a an interception as well. There were some passes that were not exactly what you want to see, but the turnover battle was the reason why Alabama won this game. Now, part of that is putting yourself in position to be in position, right? When you have 4 fumbles, that means both the opposing team is not holding on to the football as well as you're stripping and you're doing the things that it takes to cause those turnovers. And I think that Alabama did a really good job of that. And again, they were able to eventually recover the football that ended up being the difference maker in this game. Bray Hubbard puts his helmet right on the football, is able to knock it out. Deontay Lawson jumps on it immediately, and Alabama is able to win the game. After Auburn fumbles the kickoff or fumbles the punt, I guess that Lotzir Brooks tries to pick up and run back instead of just falling on the football, right? But that's a situation where Alabama, as much as Auburn only had the one fumble recovered, part of that was Alabama's fault as well, right? Lotzir Brooks doesn't fall on the football like he should have. I think that in general, you have different things like that in some cases those type things bounce. It's like Auburn gets the bounce their way and it ends up allowing them to win the game, especially in that stadium. And a lot of people have talked about how whether that stadium may be haunted or whatever. I will say I thought it was kind of funny. Nick Kelly pointed out that, is that stadium potentially haunted for Auburn, not Alabama, because in the last 3 meetings in Auburn Stadium. You have a fumble in the final minutes to secure Alabama's victory, and a score in the final minutes by Alabama, and then a fumble by Auburn as they're trying to come back. In this game, you have the 4th and 31. Last time in that stadium, and then you have the Alabama game-winning drive by Bryce Young, followed by a 4 overtime thriller. So the last 3 matchups, Auburn had, all but one, right? This one a little different. Obviously, they didn't have the win, but they were in very good position and are unable to capitalize on it. And in the last 2, they're in absolute position to win the game because they're up in very late moments of the game and are unable to succeed in winning the game, right? So the question starts becoming, that place is voodoo, but is that place potentially voodoo for Auburn? We shall see. Obviously, Auburn has a new head coach going into this next season. They just hired Alex Golish on Sunday. So, it will be a new look Auburn team next season. You're going to get more of the super wide sets that you saw out of Tennessee, that Alabama saw out of South Florida. The quarterback position is one that's going to be up for question. Are you going to get potentially a Byron Brown coming in? Is Deuce Knight going to stay? There's a lot of questions when you're looking at the different options and what Alex Golish is going to be able to do. I think Alex Golish is going to be a decent coach. I will say 7-6, 7-6, 9-3 does not to me seem like he immediately deserves the opportunity to get a job in the SEC at a place like Auburn. Um, I think that he's a bit of an underwhelming hire. Maybe with better resources, maybe he could be decent. I will say the big knock on him has been that his recruiting is not great. And I will say that if you're going to compete at the top of the SEC, you absolutely have to have the guys because, you can scheme your way up to having success, but you have to have the guys. Part of that will be solved with NIL, which Auburn, believe, has a decent NIL pool, but I'm sure part of that will also be solved by just getting on the recruiting trail. So we'll be very curious to see what happens with Alex Golish and Auburn as they, move forward under his tutelage. So we shall see from that standpoint. I'm really excited what I saw about the out of the Alabama defense. Obviously, you did give up a couple of busted plays. Malcolm Simmons had two, major busted plays that Alabama, had against them. He was really Auburn's major offense. The 66-yard touchdown where Zay Mincy could have had the interception. Instead, you miss the interception, you miss the tackle, and then he's running down the sideline, ends up scoring the touchdown. Auburn was able to have some explosives that does allow them to be successful in that game. They didn't have much of a running attack, not named Ashton Daniels. So Alabama was able to be pretty successful there. Alabama was able to be fairly successful in the passing game, or preventing the passing game, I guess I should say, outside of those explosives by Malcolm Simmons. So I do think that in general, the fact that you got a great game out of Xavier Brown against Cam Coleman was awesome. The fact that you had such good play in general across the team was very, very good to see. But, at the end of the day, I think that you're going to need a better showing than what you had in Jordan-Hare this coming Saturday against Georgia in Atlanta if you plan to win the game, right? I think that how you played was good enough to beat Auburn, but I do think that it will not be good enough to beat Georgia. So we will preview that game, talk about what happened in the first matchup, what I think is going to be different for this next matchup. I think there's a lot you can take out of the first matchup. Obviously, with it being in Athens, I think there's also a lot of things that Georgia has grown in, that Alabama has potentially grown in. So there are things that you need to see kind of going into this game. Very curious to see what's going to be happening for Alabama's next football game.